Dramatic water pouring. Hi everyone, thanks for coming out tonight on this dreary, wet November evening. But we've come out to talk about the most important thing that is going on in the world right now. And if at any other point in the past 30, 40 years this ecological emergency was going on, this would be the number one thing on all our agendas. But as we know, there are other things that are going on right now that are drawing our attention away from this stuff, isn't it? We'll try not to say the B word too often. And there's lots of other things as well that we could include in that. So what I'd like to do is spend the first bit of my talk talking a bit about the kind of broad reach of the climate change issue. I'll talk a bit about what the scientists are saying, how urgent they are, how urgent the call is that they're making. And then I'll probably try and finish by giving a few hints and tips of how I think, or how I will be listening to the candidates talk about this stuff, so we can all critique some of those ideas a little bit. Does that sound okay? Where should we start? We all know the problem. The world is heating up. And in fact, it's heating up so much that we've begun to stop using the words climate change and are now being encouraged to use the words global heating. Since pre-industrial levels, we are at over 1 degree increase, and the projections are that by the end of the century we could be anywhere between 3 and 5 degrees hotter. That might not sound so bad in kind of mild, temperate Cornwall. We might have a couple more days sun, but what we do know, and what is really clear, is that the predictions from climate change science show us that our weather events, which make up the long-term climate trends, are going to become more extreme. We only have to look back over the last couple of years in Cornwall to those really cold days this February. 2018, I was snowed in for about 4 or 5 days, probably some of you were as well. End of June this year, 35 degrees in Cornwall. First time, probably the hottest Cornish days ever. Even this autumn, it doesn't feel like it's stopped raining, does it? It feels different to other autumns somehow. So although small days on their own might feel insignificant, when you build this stuff up, what we're getting is a picture that our world is changing and we are right in the middle of this stuff. Climate scientists you might have heard of an organisation called the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change. I'm going to read what they say. They say to address this stuff, we are going to need rapid, far-reaching and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society. Now that's some pretty heavy-hitting language, and it doesn't feel like much of that stuff is going on in society as we're living in. So what I'd be encouraging you to listen to from the candidates tonight is, can you get a sense of any of that urgency, any of that far reach, and any of the unprecedented changes? What they say we need is to halve annual global emissions by 2030 and reduce them to 0 by 2050. So you might want to pay attention to targets from the candidates and their parties and their policies about when they hope to achieve these goals, if at all. Most of them have got some pretty good ideas around this stuff. But some scientists, and there was a report released just yesterday by some of the biggest names in global climate science, including Professor Tim Lenton from Exeter University, which some of you may know, and Johan Rockström from the Stockholm Resilience Centre, who came up with the idea of the planetary boundaries, these 9 measures that describe the kind of carrying capacity of the Earth. And what they published yesterday in Nature was about an idea called tipping points. Has anyone heard of this idea of tipping points? These are basically, once we go beyond them, there's no coming back. It's a bit like the entering the black hole. As soon as you get within the event horizon, that's it, you're gone. There's no turning back. And tipping points were introduced as an idea by the IPCC about 20 years ago. Since that time, it's been really vague, really unclear whether these things are are actual tangible things that can be explored by science, that can be described by us, that we can have reasonable conversations about. But now, yesterday, some of these big hitters are coming out saying that yes, these things are true and real. And this is what Professor Tim Lenton said. We might already have crossed the threshold for a cascade of interconnected tipping points. The simple version is the school kids are right. We are seeing potentially irreversible changes in the climate system underway, or very close. Now, if any of you have heard Tim Lenton talk before, he's the most softly spoken, mild-mannered fellow you could possibly imagine. So for this stuff to come out means that I think we should begin to pay attention and listen a bit more clearly to what these scientists are saying. How long have I had?
You've got about 4.5 minutes left.
Okay, got 4 minutes left. I'd like to really quickly talk about Lewis. Do you all remember Lewis? Lewis was that poor koala bear that was filmed squealing and howling running into the fires in New South Wales, and that amazing lady, brave lady, Tony Docherty, ran into the bush, took off her shirt, wrapped the koala in her shirt, and brought it back to safety. The vets looked after Lewis for 3 or 4 days in kind of koala intensive care, but sadly he passed away from his wounds. They had to euthanize him. Lewis is the canary, I think, in some of this stuff. It won't have escaped your attention that this year the entire Amazon rainforest was burning. It always burns every year. Farmers clear bits of land for agriculture. It burns in the dry season. This year the dry season was extended and the Northern Hemisphere had several months of the hottest weather it's ever known on record. This meant that 71,000 fires burned across the Amazon. Now there would have been Lewises in every single one of those fires. We wouldn't have been able to take a film or a photo of them. They wouldn't have made the front page of the internet, but you can guarantee that they all happened. Alone in New South Wales, it's estimated that something like 2 million acres of bush burnt. So much habitat was lost that scientists are now saying that koalas, which is Australia's most significant and recognisable animal, could be functionally extinct. Now, that doesn't mean it is extinct. What that means is that the population isn't viable. So if we can harm an animal that we love so dearly, or that Australians love so dearly as the koala, this tells us that we're in a really bleak place. But it's not too bleak that we can't return from it. We can rescue this situation if we act pretty quickly. And I think that's why we're all here today. We want to hear some of that urgency from the party's policies. To close, these are some of my hints for how I'll be listening to the candidates. You may like to take some of these on board, or you may think I'm talking absolute rubbish, but let's see how we get on. So firstly, I'd encourage you to be sceptical, but not quite in the way that you might think. What I mean is, try and apply the same scepticism to your party. You've probably come in here thinking you are going to vote for someone. Try and apply the same scepticism to your favourite candidate that you normally do to all the others. Does that make sense? So when we enter these kind of debates, if our favourite party says something, we kind of give them a free pass. I think you shouldn't do that. I think you should interrogate all the ideas equally. I think there's a great bit of learning that you can do when you do that, and we all get a lot from interrogating our own beliefs as much as we interrogate the beliefs of other people. The second thing is what I've painted a picture of is this stuff is really complicated. It's interconnected, it's all feeding back off itself in new and unusual ways, many of which we probably don't understand very much at all. I would ask you to try and enjoy some of that complexity, because although it seems vast and complicated, this is where we're going to find some of the most interesting answers. I would urge you to be very sceptical of claims that imply that solving the environmental crisis is easy. I would encourage you to delve down into the ways in which the parties and the people are thinking and see what's lying below the surface. Because candidates running up to an election love everything to be in a 4 or 5 word slogan that can, hesitate to say, go on the side of a bus, but go in a Twitter video or go wherever the easiest place to reach millions of people is very quickly. So see what's beneath the surface. See if there's some understanding of the complexity of this stuff from all of those people. But don't treat people badly if they don't know the answer to your question. But go easy on them because they may show that they want to find out the answer. None of us know all the answers to this stuff. So don't go hard on people if they say, I don't know. Probably the best answer we can have in this stuff is, I don't know, but I'm going to love trying to find out. The last point is we've all got to try and remain optimistic in this stuff. I think however hard it gets, you've got to remain optimistic. As far as I can see it, and this is certainly the position that I've ended up in, is that hope is the fuel for all of this stuff. But the hope only works if you do stuff. So what I think we need to combine here tonight and in the future and in the world is optimism that's fueled by practical action from all the candidates and our industries and our communities and all of that kind of stuff. On that note, I think I'll stop talking now. Thank you very much for listening.
Great, well, thanks very much. And I actually want to start with the point that Dan was making about the importance of hope in this debate, because there is a danger that if people feel that there's nothing we can do and we're just whistling in the wind with the measures that we take, and actually climate change is already past a tipping point and we cannot reverse this challenge, then people will start to give up and feel that they can't change anything anyway. It feels beyond their control. So we have to, in my view, start by recognising where we have made progress as a country. And the last Labour government introduced the Climate Change Act, but did it with Conservative support. There was cross-party support for this, so all of the parties in Parliament came together to set binding targets for climate change emissions. And in the last decade, we have made some significant progress, particularly when it comes to the energy sector. We have seen a big growth in renewable energy, and in the last 5 years, the real game changer has been offshore wind. We reached a saturation point really with onshore wind about 5 years ago, but the technology on offshore wind has developed in leaps and bounds, and it is now a very cheap form of electricity, and we have seen a huge growth in that provision. And that's been one of the key reasons why we've been able to reduce our carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions during that decade. But there's a lot more to do. And I think if you cast forward 10 years, the two areas where we can make big changes are transport, which remains the biggest area of carbon emissions, and that's why we've said in our manifesto that we want to invest in new infrastructure for charging points for electric vehicles, because we basically have to get rid of both petrol and diesel cars as quickly as we can. Again, it's an area where in the last 5 years technology on electric vehicles has developed in leaps and bounds. We just need to make sure we've got the infrastructure there so that we can get that full transition to new electric vehicles. The other area is agriculture, which is an area that I've been very involved with as farming minister. I drafted the agriculture bill, which will come back if we're re-elected, and clause 1 of that bill effectively sets out a whole load of environmental objectives that we will spend our agriculture budget on in future. So gone will be the old arbitrary area-based payments that just meant we doled out money to farmers based on how much land they owned, and rather perversely meant that the largest farmers got the biggest payments, and instead it's going to be a payment for the delivery of public goods. Improved soil health, improved water quality, planting of trees, peatland restoration, carbon sequestration through better soil management, and so on and so forth. So we have a great opportunity leaving the European Union and having that independent policy to completely redirect that budget to deliver some of our climate change objectives as it pertains to agriculture. The final thing that I wanted to say links to another point that Dan mentioned, which is the complexity of this issue. And for me, the greatest complexity comes from the need for international agreement. So we can do all that we're doing and more here as a country, but we have to recognise that it needs concerted international action to really, truly tackle this challenge. And if you go back about 10 years, there was a lot of concern about China. People used to say, well, China's still pumping out all of these coal-fired stations, and whatever we do is a drop in the ocean compared to what they are emitting. We then went through a period a few years ago where actually there was a lot of hope about China. They were really taking the environment seriously. I remember attending a G20 in China, and the whole emphasis was on green energy and the environment. And China also started to come around to be more cooperative on issues such as tackling the ivory trade. But there have been reports this week that although the national government in China has taken quite a strong position, some of the provincial governments are still building coal-fired power stations, and there's still additional coal-fired capacity coming on stream. And that shows the difficulty here, that even when you've got the Chinese government starting to move in the right way, you've then got other provincial governments that are an issue. And for me, the thing that I find most distressing about this whole issue at the moment is the loss of the Amazon. When you lose ancient forest and ancient ecosystems like that, it's gone for good. We can plant trees, yes, but it will never replace the complexity of those ecosystems. The Amazon and other similar forests around our world are the lungs of our world, and I think we have to be much more assertive in trying to use our international development budget to really incentivise and support those countries so that they do not lose their forests, because we all depend on forests like the Amazon. And that is a complex issue, because in Brazil the current government is very defensive about the rest of the world, telling it what it should be doing in the Amazon. And indeed, if you look at Brazil and their scenario planning, military planning, one of their main concerns is that the world will literally invade them to try to turn the Amazon into an international protectorate of some sort. So this shows the difficulty of some of these issues. We need other countries to play their part to protect the Amazon, to also reduce their carbon emissions. We have to work through international fora to try to deliver that through things such as COP. And that's something that, frustrating though it can sometimes be, we must continue to apply ourselves to. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Just less than 7 minutes actually, so we're not bad at all. Specific queries for George.
You speak of the Amazon. Do you accept that the problem in the Amazon is primarily due to cattle grazing and land clearance for cattle grazing?
Yes, I think that is a big part of it, and my own personal view, there's quite an argument sometimes in science between some scientists who say that to reduce emissions you need quite intensive beef farms, and those who say actually you should try to revert back to more traditional grazing systems. I have to say I'm in the latter camp, because I think we should, we can carefully manage permanent pasture, can be a sink for carbon, and I personally think that's preferable to the externality of losing the Amazon to grow soya to intensively rear cattle.
Do you accept that climate change is driven by man? Do you accept the philosophy concept behind that yourself personally?
Yes. Yes, of course. I mean, my own personal view is that it's a physical fact that carbon is an insulator, and we just know that in terms of measured by parts per million, carbon concentrations in our atmosphere have risen. And I think that's a straightforward matter for me.
I was just going to say, just because your actual voting record isn't impressive for people who are concerned about these issues.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've seen
I've seen this obviously here where you're
I don't know what it means.
£5,000 from.
Give me an example of what I've not voted
well,
for.
I'm just saying. I was looking at this, and you know how it's framed. I don't know, but I mean,
I'm afraid with
sort of
voting,
justify yourself.
Yes, sometimes what happens with voting records, you can never really. You have to judge people by what their policy is and what they are doing. The trouble with voting records is sometimes you will get parties tagging on an opportunistic amendment that doesn't fit with a particular motion or a particular bill, or is off topic, It's sometimes done for tactical reasons to try to point the finger at opposition and opponents, and it's not, that's why often there are motions that people wouldn't necessarily support.
Did you accept the £5,000?
I'm going to bring in there to make sure we've got some time. I think that was a little bit of a wriggle out of that question.
But I think this point about the £5,000.
Well, I just say someone's talking about voting, but then they don't even say what the votes were. So
But did you accept the £5,000?
I don't even recall that, but I'm assuming that whoever's produced that has got their facts right.
So we'll come back to this, just to make sure we get some.
But if you're asking whether that's affected my view, it hasn't, because I've just told you that I believe in...
Right, thank you, John. We have three hands up here. First, I think the gentleman in blue, and then you, Bella, and then the chap here.
Yeah, you talked about hope and international links and mentioned China. And if you get back into government, how are you going to negotiate, if you like, with climate deniers like Donald Trump?
Can I have the other two questions as well, and we'll make sure we're incorporating more than your
I was just wondering why you supported the spaceport.
Thank you very much indeed.
Mine actually relates to his, which is how will the trade deal with climate change denier Donald Trump improve our chances of solving this emergency?
We've got 2 minutes time.
Whoever forms the next government will have to play a part as the UK internationally to persuade all countries, whether it's China, whether it's Brazil, whether it's the United States, to take take this seriously. Now, in the case of Donald Trump, he said lots of things that I don't agree with when it comes to climate change. What we have to do, though, as the UK, as an international player in things like COP, is persuade the US that they, even if they don't like elements of what was previously agreed, they have to tackle this challenge and have to take steps forward.
But he's already pulled out of the Paris Agreement.
We have to persuade him to come back in, and we have to work that. But well, I'm just telling you that that's a challenge for anyone. It's an equal challenge. We all want the US to play their part. The government condemned them when they left, as did all the opposition parties. We're all in the same space there. And the key thing is that the UK should play its role as an international leader and play its role as well through diplomatic channels to get other countries to do that.
Do you think if we were part of a larger group, like European Union?
No, I don't agree with that, because I've seen how...
George, I want to leave that there to make sure that Bella gets her speller, isn't it? Roughly, that's right, that's her question.
Yes. One of the things we have, there's a programme called Copernicus that the UK has been a big part of through, in fact, a European space agency, but it's often dominated by the UK. And we want to develop on the work that we've done, because actually some of the work that goes on in space is about understanding our climate, and some of that investment in space science, I think, is a positive thing.
There are many questions that we need, but we're going to take them up again, so if you've got further questions we can bring it up again at the session at the end, but to make sure that everybody gets their full 10 minutes. Obviously you can speak for, George spoke for about 6 minutes, so we have an extra minute for questions. If you prefer to do that, that's entirely up to you. Thank you, George. We'll come back to some Florence. Again, you have up to 7 minutes. If you choose to use all those, that's fine. If you want to speak for less, then...
Could you give me a minute before the end, so I know if I need to rush through some bits, and I'll just get some water very quickly.
Is that part of your time?
I hope not. Okay. Right, so my name is Florence, and I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for this area. I'm a primary school teacher, and I've been teaching for 7 years, so it's been quite interesting to see the shift in schools of children's attitudes towards this, and it's quite exciting as well to think of that potential that we can harness in the future. I'm not a green expert, I am a green enthusiast. I am one of the people who's trying hard to get it right at home, but it is really tricky to find reliable information of what actually is the best choice, and we certainly need reliable sources of information for those who are trying to make changes. So there is so much. This is a huge area to try and tackle in 6 minutes probably. So I'll just give you some of the highlights if you like. Yes, our target is 2045. That is because we don't have the answers to all different areas of technology. The aviation industry is a huge form of carbon emissions that we don't have the solution for yet. So is shipping, some agricultural processes and industrial processes. So what we've set is interim targets. So we'll be 75% net carbon zero by 2030.
Yeah, I'm Paul Farmer. I'm the Labour candidate in this election. I'm going to apologise because I'm not feeling 100%. So you're not going to get the full storm and drain tonight, which a lot of people will be very grateful for, I think. But nevertheless, yeah, I want to start off with this issue of hope. There is no point in us going on, in us trying to formulate anything unless we have that hope. And of course, hope has been the watchword of the Labour Party since 2015. Particular relevance here is that the Labour Party has changed a lot since Jeremy Corbyn became leader. And into this party has come a large number of people who are ex-members of the Green Party, for example, but also environmentalists generally. So as well as the arguments that have been going on in society, in greater society, with Extinction Rebellion, for example, and the school children's strikes, and so on, we've got this strand within our party now, and much more knowledge of it. At the same time, and I again take up this issue of complexity here, at the same time, what has been absolutely fundamentally important for the Labour Party is the huge social and economic injustice which has happened in this country since 2010. And on this is predicated an idea that we need massive social change. The two together are now combined in this election. So the massive change that we need will be predicated on social justice and on the demands of the planet. And together, these have been formulated into an extensive list of policies that we've been offered to you in this election. And the point about this is transformative change. This country has got to change massively. We've got to overcome the damage which has been done to the social fabric of this country, particularly in this constituency, since 2010, and at the same time take up this challenge of climate change, this challenge to the whole existence of a better future, because it's a challenge to the whole of our future. Okay, this is my turn into a policy jukebox, for which I apologise in some ways, but I think it's kind of really important that you know that we are taking this seriously. The manifesto, I have a copy there, if you want to have a look, is entirely predicated on this. It's the first item in the manifesto and defines everything else that happens in the 107 pages of it. Okay, so here's some policies. And again, I apologise for the jukebox nature of this. Overall target to reduce the vast majority of UK emissions by 2030 and the whole lot during the 2030s. Now we do get criticism for this out of parties which have chosen the 2030 date. But I ask you to accept this as a gesture of honesty. We're saying this because we believe we can really do this. The other part of this is that we will do it sooner if we can. But it is predicated on a realistic idea of what we can do and how we can do it. And this is all predicated too on the idea of a just transition. So this happens within the context of this huge change which the country needs, this huge transformative change which the country needs. So this does not devolve on the poorest people in society, because this is what happens if you predicate it entirely on economic means. If you don't have many, it hits you harder. And as someone who's been brought up in council estates all my life, I'm very used to posh people telling me that I now need to suffer. And I don't trust it anymore. And this is why green policies have often not had effect where they should. There'll be a windfall tax on oil companies, so that the people who have actually damaged the environment will pay for this, at least the beginning of overcoming this problem. Local transport. This is a huge issue here, because our local transport is basically not good and is becoming hugely expensive. Anyone dependent on buses will know they are now competing with taxis for expense. So, we're going to increase and expand local services, allow the local authorities to take them back over, reinstate 3,000 bus routes that have been cut nationally, free bus travel for under 25s, create 1 million decent UK climate jobs in green industry and energy, infrastructure, buildings and agriculture, with a £250 billion green transformation fund and 320,000 green apprenticeships. These are huge, huge changes. Create a national investment bank and a network of regional development banks with £250 billion for lending for green businesses, cooperatives and community projects in line with the decarbonisation mission. We're rebalancing the manufacturing industry of this country on the basis of creating green technology and leading the world in that. And in terms of this constituency, which is predicated in the northern part at least entirely on the history of mining and engineering, this is hugely significant for the way that our people see themselves and see their history. Create a sustainable investment board, which will serve the Chancellor the Business Secretary and the Bank of England Governor to coordinate green investment with trade unions and business. Climate impacts will be incorporated into budgets. And what this means, this bit of splurge, means is that this is absolutely central to everything that happens in this country from now on, from December the 13th onwards. Renewable resources for 90% of electricity and 50% of heat by 2030, 9,000 wind turbines, which is 2,000 onshore and 7,000 offshore, and an entirely new government-based business producing those turbines, and solar panels covering 22,000 football pitches. That formulation always disturbs me because I'm very fond of football. I just wonder which football pitches they're going on. Nuclear power and tidal energy. New parks, urban green space and environmental protections. Huge announcement on that today. A Clean Air Act to tackle toxic air. Between 40,000 and 50,000 people in this country now are having their health severely impacted by polluted air. We're going to ban fracking. Fracking was gone in this country. Stop the sale of county farms. Increase county farms. These are farms rented for rent by people who don't own the land. Cornwall Council has maintained their county farms. Overall, nationally, there'll be an expansion of that. Delist companies obstructing climate action from the stock exchange. Renationalise the energy grid using public ownership to accelerate and coordinate investment to connect renewable and low carbon energy. Very significant here, because the grid, the real basic grid, the strong spine of it does not reach this far, and this has got to change. Work with the energy unions to support energy workers through a transition. This is really important. One of the things within the Labour Party is the trade unions are very important. And we've seen that date, that 2030's date, changing over the last few months, and a policy conference to bring it down to 2030. And there's a continual negotiation here because the trade unions are trying to look after their members' interests. And we want to make sure, again, this is not done at the expense of workers in these industries, that there is a just transition where the people who can afford to pay for this. And the people. Sorry?
20 seconds.
Sorry, okay. £4 billion of international climate finance to support international compensation for countries suffering climate damage. And I would also say we'll have an ethical foreign policy, which means these countries will trust us and will believe us when we say, no, we are doing this for the world's good and not ours.
You were saying just now about the international element. At the moment, a lot of what we do is quite hypocritical because we just export our problems. How are Labour going to deal with that?
It's the actual details of it, I've got to admit, is not entirely clear yet, but this is part of an overall new approach to the way we deal with countries in the world. Part of which is also the fact that we no longer feel free to go to war with countries in pursuit of America's interests, for example. But predicated on the belief that we are credible, and we are consistent, and we are fair, and we are honourable. New things for us in international affairs.
Could you clarify, you read quite quickly a bit about delisting companies on the stock exchange. Could you expand? Is that fossil fuel companies? What?
Yeah, this is companies which are considered to be pursuing their economic aims in defiance of what is necessary for decarbonisation to take place. So it could be fossil fuel companies, but also those companies which actually invest overseas, for example, in fossil fuels and so on.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. Just following on from that, currently our current government subsidise fossil fuels by the tune of about £10 billion a year, compared to around £7 billion for the renewable sector. What are Labour going to do with that? Are they going to scrap subsidies for fossil fuel companies, which are the richest on the planet?
Yeah, we're going to be taking money off the fossil fuel companies, but this rebalancing will take place in a way which means that we are actually doing a transition which isn't sort of sudden and catastrophic, that we actually manage to do this in ways which allow this to go forward in a just transition.
One very brief last question, and then we're going to move on to the next speaker.
Has Labour got any policies on reducing plastic production? The big companies that produce the plastic that we have to take on, we have to buy, because everything is in plastic.
Very
any policies not just like saying, okay, let's just change this industry and have recyclable or stuff that's not even plastic at all.
Yeah.
We need something else, plastic.
Yeah, I mean, there is an overall underlying policy in this, which is to shift manufacturing away from the polluting old technology to newer stuff generally.
So I mean, for years now we've been going on about the plastic, and still we're just bombarded with it day in, day out. There's plastic everywhere.
Yeah.
Still,
Yeah.
nothing's been done.
Yeah,
the big companies that are producing it, they need to be.
And I think part of this huge investment which is going in terms of actually turning this into a green economy will be in terms of actually pursuing new ways of making things and new patterns of manufacture and new technologies.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, questioners. Please take a seat and can we thank Paul? Again, you have up to 7 minutes. If you choose to use all those, that's fine. If you want to speak for less, then
Could you give me a minute before the end so I know if I need to rush through some bits, and I'll just get some water very quickly.
Is that part of your time?
I hope not. Okay. Right, so my name is Florence and I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for this area. I'm a primary school teacher and I've been teaching for 7 years, so it's been quite interesting to see the shift in schools of children's attitudes towards this, and it's quite exciting as well to think of that potential that we can harness in the future. I'm not a green expert, I am a green enthusiast. I am one of the people who's trying hard to get it right at home, but it is really tricky to find reliable information of what actually is the best choice, and we certainly need reliable sources of information for those who are trying to make changes. So there is so much. This is a huge area to try and tackle in 6 minutes probably. So I'll just give you some of the highlights if you like. Yes, our target is 2045. That is because we don't have the answers to all different areas of technology. The aviation industry is a huge form of carbon emissions that we don't have the solution for yet. So is shipping, some agricultural processes and industrial processes. So what we've set is interim targets. So we'll be 75% net carbon zero by 2030. We will insulate all Britain's homes by 2030. There's an estimated 2.5 million households in fuel poverty, and we will start with the lowest income households. So for the first 5 years of 2025, it will be free retrofits for those homes. That's particularly important in Cornwall because we have a lot of old homes with poor energy efficient ratings. And there'll also be a requirement for landlords as well to increase the energy efficiency of their homes so that people in the rental market also have good heating and a safe environment to live in. So that would also, by the same token, be ending fuel poverty at the same time. All new homes by 2021 will be built to a zero carbon standard, and that standard would then increase by 2025 to passive house. And we would have a zero carbon heat strategy to phase in the use of heat pumps to get us off the gas grid. That's homes and businesses as well. Rattle through. We'll invest in renewables, so will be 80% of our power will be generated from renewables by 2030. We will ban fracking straight away. We will remove the restrictions that have been put on by the Conservatives that took away solar power subsidies, took away the Green Deal, and all new homes will be built with solar panels. And we'll invest in innovation of cutting-edge technology such as for tidal and wave power, energy storage and demand response. Trees were mentioned. We would of course be planting trees, and as I said, I'm not an expert, but certainly if I was an MP, my aim would be to be listening to experts and trying to make sure we're getting the right type of trees and not messing it up. That is partly to increase and rebuild up our biodiversity, but also to help with carbon capture. We would also reform agricultural payments, but unlike George, I don't think we need to leave the EU to do that. We would reform the Common Agricultural Policy so that it moves away from direct payments to payments for public goods, like we said, for flood protection, increasing the soil quality, planting trees, those sorts of things. It's not just about this country and what's right here, we've talked about that. So we also have a British Overseas Ecosystem Fund, which is large environmental restoration projects for UK overseas territories. There'll be a complete overhaul of our transport system. We need to electrify the railway systems, reopen small stations, get bus services into local authority control so that it's actually more attractive to use public transport than it is to use the roads, which it is right now. And despite the electric vehicle technology having been around for some time, about only 2% of people are actually using that. So it's not just about having the infrastructure, it's also about making it affordable as well. And we'll reduce the VAT on electric vehicles from 20% down to 5%. The aviation industry is a huge issue, so one of the things we'll do to tackle it in the meantime, because it is increasing the amount of flights that are being taken, is to tax those, create a new aviation tax to tax those who are taking the most flights. So those who are polluting the most pay the most. About 70% of all flights are taken by 15% of people. And keep going. Excellent. So thinking about the broader issue, the global issue, we will also be working to educate, empower and increase opportunities for women globally. So our manifesto says, pursue a foreign agenda with gender equality at its heart, focusing on the transformation of the position of women through economic inclusion, education and training, ensuring the lives of women and girls are not ignored in favour of trade or regional alliances. And that's really important because there is a undisputed trend between education of women and the number of children that they have. They have fewer children, they have healthier children, and they have control over their choices and opportunities in life. Plastics, we will ban non-recyclable single-use plastics, replacing them with affordable alternatives completely within 3 years, working towards ending a throwaway culture by 2030. We're also going to encourage design products so that products can be reused and repaired. We want to bring that culture back of repairing, which will also create opportunities for local businesses as well. And that will be supported by the EU, I'm hoping I'm going to find it here, it's a EU legislation, the right to repair. So there's lots of great things that come out of the EU, and we're definitely better off in it. Business is definitely part of the solution, and we haven't got all those answers. We have to invest. So we are going to put 3% of GDP into innovation to help find those solutions, provide subsidies and tax breaks for companies to help them spend more time on research and exploring to find these solutions as well.
1 minute, Laura.
Thank you so much. It is a global issue, and I want to come back to that. So we have to have a strategy. I think it's better to be in the EU, working towards a target where 28 different member states get to carbon zero by 2050 than just on our own, getting there by whichever date we have mentioned. But we also will provide aid to developing countries to help them transition to clean sources of energy and initiate negotiations within the UN for legally binding international treaty on plastics reductions. And there's a lot more than that, those are just a few. Finally, we would devolve power to local authorities so that they would have more funding and power to create their own zero carbon strategies. And we'd use a citizens' assembly to try and harness some of this power that's coming from the people, from young people, from groups like Extinction Rebellion, because actually the changes that are happening are going to affect us. And evidence shows that more radical change happens when it comes from a citizens' assembly than from a parliament that is maybe afraid of upsetting people. Thank you. I know, sorry, I'm so sorry.
Right, question here and then a question here.
So, I mean, one of the big challenges is getting the public to come along with you.
Yeah.
As the Liberal Democrats, what are you going to do to actually get people to change the way they live? Because that's the big challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. So education has got to be the key. We have to be having conversations with people outside of this room, with people who are already interested. Education in schools is going to really help because those children coming through, I mean, I'd reduce the voting age to 16 for a start, because all of those people who are completely energised and they are aware that this is their future, they will be voting on those matters. But actually a citizens' assembly, the whole point is you include people in the solution. There's very few people out there who would deny that climate change is an issue, but that hasn't necessarily translated into, yes, I'm okay with having a wind farm nearby me, and yes, I'm okay with houses looking different. So if you sit down and go, yes, you agree with me that there is a problem, well, how do you think, how should we fix that? I think people are much more amenable then to going along with those solutions if they're helping come up with them themselves.
I've got a question on the technology solution. What if, with all the investment, those technologies don't work and we're another 10, 15 years down the line?
Yeah. So if there's no solution, let's say we're 15 years down the line.
If you're relying on the technology to be part of your solution,
and
they don't work, then we're nearly at 2030 and you've only got 10, 15 years to get to your deadline of 2045. What happens then?
Yeah, so the other day when we had a similar hustings, I did say that these plans should evolve, and there should be a process of reflection, because actually the more we find out, like we said, these reports are being updated all the time, we should be reflecting and changing that. I mean, obviously, we can't innovate our way out of it, then we need to change our behaviours more, and that's part of the aviation taxation, is to try and change people's behaviour through policy, and we probably have to take a much more radical approach to that if we couldn't find the innovations for it.
Thank you. Those two questions, could you both, in fact you've got three there, could you just say your questions very briefly and we'll take them all at once?
Okay. It was, you mentioned home insulation.
Yes.
And yet, when the Liberal Democrats were in government, the government actually scrapped the Sustainable Homes Standard, which should have been introduced in 2016. So I wonder how you would convince me that you're actually serious about home insulation.
Thank you. Sorry, I'll take the two quickly to make sure we've got time to... the lady with the striped scarf.
I just wondering what the Lib Dem position on the third runway at Heathrow was.
Thank you. And the lady with the address.
I'm just wondering if the Lib Dems are very much pursuing an austerity and hard capitalist future, and I don't know how does that align with green policies.
Okay,
so insulation, airport, and austerity.
Yes, we're against the runway, the third runway at Heathrow, so that one's quite easy. I don't think we do have a policy of austerity. I think certainly we were part of that coalition, and there was austerity, and I will own that. All parties actually had a manifesto of austerity at that time, but our manifesto going forward isn't. And a report came out this week, I think, saying that the Liberal Democrat manifesto was the most progressive and would have 600,000 fewer children in poverty.
Report from whom?
I'll send it to you if you come and see me afterwards. It was in the news a lot. So I would have to disagree on that. Yeah, but I'd have to disagree with that point.
And then what about insulation and sustainable homes?
Yeah, the coalition, and not a favourite. I'm assuming it's the coalition that you're referring to. I'd have to look into that policy and how it was that it was scrapped. All I can say is that this is our policy going forward, and I know that's probably not very satisfying for you. I became a member after the coalition. I don't believe that the coalition is reflective of the Liberal Democrats' policies or views. We were a minority part of that coalition, and this is our manifesto of what we would do if we were in power.
I think this is an issue of trust, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is where it's coming out. So, right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank
take
you.
a seat. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Manda. My name's Karen Borde and I'm the Green Party candidate. And it's really hard standing up here now to follow the three people with so many good policies. However, I'd like to address the hope business first, because that is in the Green movement, and I can see a lot of people in here have been in the Green movement. We do roll from hope to despair, from hope to despair. It's very difficult to live with at times. It's a despair week because of yesterday. However, whatever you think about that, the Green Party policies that we're putting forward at this election is about making a better world for us all. It's about well-being. It's about making the future better. Forget what's going to happen. We're going to make it better. So, 10 years ago, the world's financial system collapsed. And as governments began bailing out banks and embarking on devastating austerity programs, the Green Party did something absolutely completely different. In 2008, Carolyn Lucas put together a team of experts in finance, energy and the environment. And together they embarked on something really different, and they designed a Green New Deal. And this is a new vision to replace the broken economic, social and political systems which we can see now lying in tatters around us. The systemic failure is much bigger in magnitude than the financial crash. Since 2008, as Stan has told us, the planet has been ringing the alarm louder and louder. Inequality is now at levels that we've not seen since the 1930s, and people have lost faith in their political representation. So we can no longer just press this snooze button and carry on as business as usual. The system is coming to a close, so we need to wake up to a real change in system. So we need to decarbonise every single sector of the UK life by 2030, whilst at the same time delivering social justice, relieving poverty and rebuilding our democracy. The 2019 Green Party manifesto is the culmination of 10 years hard work, and every policy within it intertwines the three themes. We mend the planet, we mend social inequality and poverty, and we mend democracy. We cannot repair one sector without mending the rest. So here we go into the policy shift. Okay, here we go. Paul Farmer, you do it so well. Mend the planet. The Green Party will spend £100 billion per year investing in new technologies and training to assist people and businesses to transition to a net zero carbon economy. Our energy will be 100% from domestic sources, 70% from onshore and offshore wind. There will be solar, geothermal in this area, and we say absolutely no to nuclear energy. It is now economically unviable because it's too expensive compared to renewable energy. We will transform our transportation system, including locally run electrified bus fleets, publicly owned and electrified railway system, and a transition from personal car use. This lady asked earlier, how do we do that? We make public transport cheaper than using a personal car. Emissions from flights, here we go, this is yours. Frequent flyer levy and an aviation fuel tax which will require international cooperation. There'll be no new runways, no new road building programmes, and what's the last one? No HS2, okay? So that's our platform. 1 million homes a year will be retrofitted, 1 million more will have solar added to their roofs to reduce full fuel poverty alongside reducing emissions. Planning laws will have to be changed, and don't believe Mr Eustice when he says renewable energy was saturated at onshore wind turbines, saturated our energy. It was not the case. It was the grid that was underinvested in. Now if we invest in the grid, double its capacity, we can create more renewable energy in this country. It is that simple. For our environment, I quite agree with George. He's written a lot about this and I'm quite up there with him. We do need to make massive changes to how we subsidise and help our farmers. Farmers should be rewarded for farming organically and they will be subsidised. And the Green Party actually has this lovely aim to make farms adopt, or to help them, encourage them to adopt agroforestry. And that we're hoping for 50% by 2030. We want to encourage and support small and family farms over intensive agriculture. And there will be in this those lovely monies and support for rewilding projects and restoration of our soils. And also we will end the badger cull. The lady at the back, the Green Party want to ban the manufacture of single-use plastic packaging. And they want to extend the carrier bag tax to all plastic, single-use plastic products such as bottles, etc. And will adopt the polluter pays principles, and manufacturers of this stuff will have to pay for the disposal and the recycling of it. So how do we mend social inequality and poverty? Well, we're wanting to implement a carbon tax, which will reduce emissions, and it will be put on imported and domestic fossil fuel. The £76 billion raised from this will be used for a universal basic income for everyone over the age of 18. All current benefits will be scrapped apart from some disabled ones and housing benefits, and will be replaced by an £89 per week unconditional payment. So people can have back their dignity, can take time off if they choose to look after their children, can take time off to train, and when they return to work, are not punished for doing so. And the biggest one, I think, for me, is mending our democracy. I think Florence alluded to it. It does feel like we're all isolated from where decisions are made these days. And it's no coincidence for us as Greens that our fellow European countries are running ahead of us in the bid to be carbon free. For instance, Luxembourg has got a completely free public transport system. Germany last week set its first hydrogen train off. And why are we behind? Because we can't get a green in the room. And I look round here at certain faces, and I know they really like a green in the room, But we can't get in that room to help influence decisions because we're saddled with a first past the post electoral system which has kept us out, and these policies need to be in there. So one of our first things we have to do is we have to advocate for proportional representation, and I look to the Labour Party to enable that for everybody. Okay, you're a socialist party. Just use my tagline. There's so much I want to tell you, but a climate ecological catastrophe is upon us, and I really firmly believe we need climate ecological experts for this. And 10 years down the line, that is the Green Party. And I've heard a lot about international, working together internationally and collaboratively. I will tell you that this Green Deal devised by the Green Party in the UK is being rolled out and spoken of in all countries across the globe, and I'm proud of that, and I trust you all are too. Thank you.
You told us on 4 occasions that we must fly less. Isn't this a strange piece of advice? Maybe a Damascene conversion from someone up until September this year ran a company sending people on skiing trips to New Zealand?
Absolutely. It is, as you say, it is about change. And I can't deny it, I have to own it, that I did own a ski company. I was a director of a company that trained ski and snowboard instructors for 8 years. I cannot deny that. But my epiphany came, and the lady at the back will probably understand this, from collecting plastic on the beach. And I suddenly realised, how can we be damaging the world so badly? So I joined the Green Party in 2014.
Did you pass that advice on to fly less to the new owners of the company?
Pardon?
Did you pass your advice on to fly less to the new owners of the company?
Yes, and they're trying to decarbonise. But
so they'll just be skiing in Europe now, will they, not Canada or New Zealand?
No. It's down to them where they ski. I can't speak
5.5 tonnes of CO2 emissions for a trip to New Zealand.
Thank you for that point. I'm going to move on to a couple of other questions because obviously it's a very, very big issue. We've only got a few minutes. We've got a question here and a question here.
You said that you wanted to make public transport cheaper than driving in a car, which is great because I don't own a car at the moment, so that's really good. But I just wanted to know what would then happen for disabled people who were unable to take public transport. Would they, they're then going to lose out financially because they're too disabled to be able to get onto a bus or a train?
That's a really difficult one to answer. That really is delving deep into the detail. There was no policy in that.
Okay, no, just because both my parents were disabled and they weren't physically able, I mean, they even had to have a certain kind of car because a lot of cars they couldn't even get in and out, let alone get on a bus. So
this is a real technological question. I mean, one of the things I hear from the Tory party is that they actually think that by electrifying cars, right, just building an infrastructure, we will have a huge electrical car revolution. We'll have the same amount of cars on the road. That is going to be impossible. There's not enough minerals on the planet to serve the need for those sort of batteries. So what we have to do is look at a new way of travelling. So we do need electrical vehicles, and we do need electrical transport for people with disabilities, obviously. But if you know the vehicle industry, they are so far behind in electrification, it's untrue. The Cornwall Council has just spent millions on a new fleet of lorries for the waste. Not one of them, not one, is electric, because they're not there.
I was astonished when I had business in Newcastle, and I drove from Oxford with some other people in the car as well, and there was just a dual carriageway up to Newcastle from the north of England, no motorway. I mean, it was really pretty poor. There's a huge, population up there. I appreciate the idea of not going ahead with HS2, but to sort of just stop all infrastructure on transport, surely that is not wise. And there should be, for the north of England to develop better, there should be some infrastructure. I mean, if HS2 was just to the north of England and sort of started at the top and worked down and sort of got about halfway, wouldn't that be quite a good policy?
No, I don't agree with you. We need to invest in infrastructure for transport, but it's not roads. It is about trains and public transport. But the other point that you made is about the north needs to get down to the south to have any economic purpose. It's about building up our own manufacturing industries within our own areas that is crucial.
I've already taken a question from you. If you don't mind, I'm going to go to you just with this one last one, and then I'm going to have it sit down.
I totally empathise with your point about needing to bring the Greens into the room for the conversation amendment. So I understand your point about proportional representation. But if you're looking to the Labour Party to be able to enable that, I'm just wondering what your rationale is for actually standing against Paul and potentially stopping him getting into this seat.
Because currently the Labour Party, Paul may support proportional representation, but the Labour Party doesn't. And
no, it's not true. There's a policy in the manifesto for a constitutional convention. Perhaps Paul can tell us.
Is that it's not proportional representation then?
It's electoral reform.
There's a constitutional convention in the manifesto with the Citizens' Assembly about how we best represent the public. And that's inevitably going to be the subject of that.
That is
the point. Proportional representation is bound to be, isn't it?
No.
What else could be discussed under those?
You'd be quite surprised about what citizens' assemblies do throw up. I mean, they're not quite the panacea I think a lot of people think they are. But I take your point about the Constitution.
I'm confused by your answer because you just said full support for proportional representation. So it's Paul you're standing against.
Number one sentence clarification on that, Karen, and then we're going to wrap up.
I'm standing up for Green Party policies.
Against Paul?
No. I'm standing up for Green Party policies. And one of those is we want proportional representation. And that is one difference between us and the Labour Party, because Paul's party, the Labour Party, haven't got that in their manifesto.
I think that would be a good...
everyone in the room to read the manifesto.
I think that would be
has got a policy.
A good point to bring up in the whole panel, because it would allow all the candidates to have a response to that. Clearly, this is something that that involves more than one candidate. You are dispatched. Thank you very much.
Well, as pleased to see you. Good evening. By the way, you're not in Camborne, you're in the parish of St. Lugan, and you're in the civil parish of Cornbray. The Almighty put it here to keep Camborne and Redruth apart. Now, we're very, very, very pleased that you are in St. Lugan and not in Camborne. It's very simple. You could put this question in one phrase: back to basics. We have become very clever in our ways. We have run after great dreams, and in the meantime we have caused the crisis. That's what's happened. We are where we are. We didn't have climate problems when we were going around with horse and carts, and I'm not suggesting that we go back there now. What I am saying is we are where we are. No one party can solve it. It is time everybody had a consensus, particularly in Parliament, not voting against each other because they think their green issue is better than somebody else's. It's time to get heads together and go on and do it. I don't think we can do it on our own as a nation. I think we should do it with others. I don't necessarily mean in Europe, because I'm a Brexiteer anyway, but we can put heavy pressure on those that cause the most pollution, like China, the United States, India. I am sorry that the United States seem to think that they don't want to be involved with this. I think it's partially because they cause a lot of the trouble. 2 of the major nuclear disasters happened in 3 Mile Island, didn't it? We seem to forget this. That's why the Liberal Party is passionately anti-nuclear, not just weapons, but nuclear power. The power that's coming through that electric up there is being made by a nuclear power station in Somerset. We used to make our electric here. I'm an ex-SWEB. I served my apprenticeship with the South Western Electricity Board. You might know it more familiarly as the slowest workers ever born, but never mind. far as I'm concerned, it was 6 workers, 18 bosses. But I'm honestly telling you, we should put that back here. We have enough ways of doing it. Sea power, rivers, estuary power, solar panels, etc. We can do that as long as you don't put the solar panels on good agricultural land, because we're going to need to feed ourselves as well. The Liberal Party set up the county farms estates. We're very proud of that. 100 years later, they're still going. But under the Liberal Democrats, who have been running County Hall for a long time, the number of small farms has shrunk from when I was on the committee, when I was a county councillor, from 178 to less than 100, which is not the idea. The idea for me is to have more county farms, more young people in our agriculture. They shouldn't be shutting them down like they are. We should plant trees, and they should be the right trees in the right places. But planting trees don't solve it now. But what you're planting trees for is your generations in the future, because the trees in 60 years' time will be more mature. And we must be thinking of our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, etc. We should grow our own food. We should buy Cornish. We should buy things locally, not just food, but anything else that's made locally. Why go there into Tesco's and buy it in Tesco's when you can buy it locally? It might cost a little more, but you're helping the local economy. One thing I do not like, which does happen, is that they grow a vegetable here, like a cauliflower, they stick it on a lorry, it goes all the way up to Somerset to be sorted by that particular supermarket, brought all the way back for you, and it got local. It's got Cornish greens, but it's gone all over there. How much carbon emission has gone that way? Why the hell can't we plant them locally, do it locally, sort it locally, and put it in the shop locally, like we used to do? We're totally against fracking, although we know we won't have that in Cornwall. The Eden project, I'm very keen about that. I was a member of the County Planning Committee for 16 years, and I voted passionately for that. And there was one occasion when they needed some extra money, you may remember, and it came back. And there was a certain political party that was opposed to having extra money, and we won the vote by a single vote, and that was mine. Because the Eden project is one of the best things that happened in Cornwall for a long time. And I'll tell you this, that isn't familiar with many people. Some of us actually thought it would be a good idea to have the railway put in from Eden down to St Austell, because much of the track was there on the old mineral railway, and the Liberal Democrats voted it out and said, no, we'll put a road in. Now we're sitting there, am I right? I am right. And we lost the vote. You couldn't have the railway. It was a great shame. So some of us have been fighting this for many years, if you get what I mean, in our humble little way.
1 minute.
I believe in single transferable vote. Housing is important. We're building the wrong houses for the wrong people. We have 20,000 on the housing waiting list here. We should build 20,000 social houses. Incidentally, council houses was started by Lloyd George as well. And the other thing we must do is make sure that any modern house that's built now is totally environmentally friendly. We talk about the houses of the past, which must be brought up to date, but why build them in future that are not environmentally friendly? And the other thing I have to say to you is very simply, if you're confused, the Liberal Party was formed in 1859. If people are confused because there's a Liberal Democrat Party, that's not my fault. Somebody's nicking my name.
We'll get through these issues. Permaculture offers many of the solutions needed to tackle the climate change and halt biodiversity loss. I'd love to see it taught in schools. Are any of the candidates aware of permaculture? And if so, what steps will they take to promote and introduce it so it become accepted and adopted by mainstream business and culture?
I think I can put my hand up an awful lot on it, don't I?
I think there's two things we want to do with education with Green Party. One is we want to call an English Climate Emergency Education Act to ensure that climate change, the severity of it and what we're doing about it is taught within schools. But permaculture is a huge improvement in modern farming practices, and in schools we want to see the implementation of a nature GCSEs to put our kids outdoors and with the environment, growing their own food, to learn how they can do it.
You're going to get class for concision here as well, so I'm going to ask.
No expert on permaculture, but in view of the question about schools, the schools curriculum needs to be freed up from its intense obsession with these very few subjects, which cut out art subjects and subjects like this, and we need to actually make an education system which is rounded.
Thank you very much indeed. Nigel Brett would like to know if any party has done an environmental audit. I presume you mean of their own activities. And what action are you taking in respect to the limits set by the scientific evidence on the carrying capacity of the planet, such as the Climate Committee, IPCC? So this is a very specific question to how you're managing your own impact. Any offers on this?
As I said, I don't know, but I really would love to find out.
Oh, I think there are plenty of suggestions here.
I think that's Labour Party. I think not. Yesterday, a coach came down to Cornwall from London and drove people around, and then they went back on the train, and the coach presumably went off. And I think that urgently needs to happen because that feels wrong.
Did you have something?
It's worth noting that government does, right across government, every department as part of its departmental plan has to have a plan to reduce its carbon emissions and has to publish as public bodies the carbon emissions that they have.
And do you, as an individual candidate and MP?
As an individual candidate, I don't know whether the party does. The party probably has. I mean, I know it's not long ago that everybody used to go around everywhere in helicopters, and that was all stopped about 10 years ago. All parties, both parties, Labour and...
Well, the next question then is relevant then. The question is from Guy. Parliament says, how many flights have the candidates taken in the last 5 years? So this is about trust. I think the same notion of trust and democracy and authenticity. How many flights have the candidates taken in the past 5 years?
None.
None.
I have.
Yes.
I go by the RMS Salonian.
None. Thank you.
I don't know, I've probably taken about 5 or 6.
Okay.
But I haven't flown in 2 years.
Okay.
How many Eustice taken?
Yeah, well, I don't keep that, but I have in the last year at least once I've had to fly down from London to Newquay to get down in time for a meeting, but I normally go by train. I haven't had, I've got a toddler at the moment, I haven't had an overseas holiday for at least 3 or 4 years.
Joe Swinson likes flying it.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on. There's definitely an issue about aviation here, but we can't unfortunately spend more time on it than that because it's one of my bugbears. Emma Hickey, a student at the Eden Project, asks, Brexit has taken a huge amount of political energy during the last 3 years, yet we're in the midst of a climate emergency which, if not acted upon, will render Brexit meaningless. Yeah. What do the panellists have to say to the young people, specifically young people, in the UK about this? Florence?
Well, stop Brexit and get back to climate change.
So that's but I think there was a question specific about young people. About young people, about addressing young people.
Well, I think the most important thing is climate change, but so the Tories closed down a department on energy and environment and opened 2 on Brexit. Let's stop Brexit and deal with this.
Listening to young people, people 16 and 17 should have a vote.
Yeah. I think we need to be made aware of all the facts. We know more and more as time goes on, and once we have a deal, a real deal on the table, we should have a people's vote and put this all to bed.
Done so we can move on and address these issues. The idea that another 2 years or more arguing
definitely
referendum.
very close to
I think one of the things that should happen, as someone who's been a local councillor for nearly 35 years, is for young people around 18 to join a local council, stand for local elections. One of the things that's missing in all our local councils, even Cornwall Council, is the young voice. Us old fogies can tell you what you like, But if the young people get involved, we'll have a better balance of policy.
Okay, one more thing. Could you stop insulting young people's and everyone else's intelligence by using meaningless phrases like "get Brexit done"? Let's treat them as
and young people, I'll go back to your question. I worked in the ski instructor industry for 10 years, and that gave young people an opportunity to work all over the globe. It's hard to get international visas, but it was always easy to work in Europe. And you, if you vote for Brexit, are taking away the freedom of our young people.
About many people are saying about funding into climate change. It says what will be funded in Cornwall and how will this tackle the climate emergency? Look, this is a very specific Cornwall specific funding question. What is going to go towards this emergency in Cornwall?
a huge investment in developing green technology and in leading the world in the manufacture and revolutions in green technology.
Thank you very much, Karen.
There is that, and we have very similar green deals, as you're probably aware. So there is the inward investment that would come here, but there will be a specific £3 billion funding for local authorities to tackle this themselves within their own local authority areas, because that's what's troubling Cornwall Council at the moment. They've declared an emergency, they want to make changes, but the coffers are not there. Apart from, and that's why I was there on Tuesday with the good people up there, they invested in a spaceport rather foolishly.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll get some queries, some thoughts down here.
Well, a key area will be in agriculture, so over $3 billion a year goes on agriculture policy, and we're going to redirect that towards environmental outcomes, things such as tree planting. We've also established a £650 million nature fund to support nature-based solutions to tackling climate change. That's a national plan.
Cornwall, have you got a Cornwall figure?
Well, I don't have a Cornwall figure, no, but they benefit from both of those funds. It's a national plan.
Yes, I don't have the exact figures, but we are committed to increasing spending significantly for local authorities.
Anything more specific?
I'd have to check. I don't want to get it wrong.
Okay, thank you. Cool.
We should replace Cornwall Council with the Cornish Assembly, being a nation in our own right. That being said, a lot of the decisions that are made out of Cornwall, places like Bristol and London, could be made here, and we'll make fewer mistakes making our own decisions than what they're doing imposing it on us.
Thank you very much indeed. Several questions from David Gordon. One is about farming and our populated situation. We've had some response on farming, obviously not enough, but I think I'm going to go on to your next question, which is Cornwall Council CO2 neutral 2030 report in 6 months. It's regarding that. How does each candidate party see the future of planning and development, both residential and business, fit into Cornwall's committed strategy of carbon neutral by 2030?
Massive investment in affordable homes. Many of them council houses, all built to a carbon neutral standard, and overcoming this imposition of these 57,000 houses completely of an unspecified nature, which the government has imposed on Cornwall Council.
I'm in agreement with Paul there. It's the imposition of 50,000 houses on Cornwall that is inappropriate. Cornwall should have a Cornish Assembly to decide their own numbers of houses based on the need in Cornwall, and it should be social housing now. The Green Party is committed to building socially owned council housing for future generations, because that is where we're missing it. And I can't say for Cornwall in specific, but they're aiming to build 100,000 socially owned homes every year.
And a second question, I don't know who it's from, but it relates to this. It's, because of course we've got all those old properties in Cornwall, so it's not just about the new build. You can make a new build better, certainly, but with the retrofit it's a bit more complicated. Energy efficiency measures, it says, are often provided free by the energy companies, items such as insulation, etc. These are often targeted at those poorest in society on benefits, etc., but the costs are recouped by putting a charge on energy bills. So the question is, how can we ensure that the poorest in our society are not paying disproportionately for measures to produce climate change? This is about climate justice.
So we wouldn't be doing it through energy companies, we would be retrofitting those homes, so it wouldn't then come with an associated cost. And it
so that would be with government money?
Yeah, and it would start with those who are the lowest income households. So it would be free retrofits for those homes.
Right. And that would be in Cornwall as well?
Yes, that's everywhere.
And also the energy needs to be predominantly publicly owned as well, and so, a social conformity in front.
So you're talking about nationalisation or community-owned power companies?
There'll be it's a mixed economy here. It's national ownership of the grid and the energy distribution companies, but locally owned generation in many cases.
Right, thank you. Paul, George, did you have your?
I think.
I'll just go to Paul first, but I just check.
We Brexiteers put a stick together. There is a case for bringing back into public ownership electricity, gas and water, because although you can do what you like about the bills and how you charge people for environmentally friendly schemes or whatever, I run or help run the Liberal Hall in Camborne, and when we get our gas and electric bills, there's a green tax on it because they consider it a business, even though the old folk in there are having their dinners every day, you know, it's a day centre. They don't know. They're paying a green tax when they eat their food, quite frankly, because it's cooked by gas. But the other thing is, most of our water, gas and electric is foreign owned. So the money is leaving this country and it should stay here. And if it stayed here, you would have more money to invest in the very things you're saying. You can't at the moment because they charge you a bill and take the profits to somewhere else like France and Germany.
So it's localisation rather than George, did you have
I think obviously getting planning regulations right is absolutely critical on the new build to ensure that when we are building new homes they are energy efficient. On some of the older homes, quite a lot of work has been done in the last sort of 20 or so years through both the Warm Front scheme that was there and Green Deal. And it's worth remembering that when people do these investments, it actually does help save them money because it costs them less to heat their homes as well, and that's been an incentive.
Only if you have the money to do it first. I did scrap the Green Deal.
And I would say as well, in actual fact, there is work that local authorities in their local places are trying to do, but in actual fact there is government policy which is holding them back, such as the implementation of renewables on new build. So we need a courage perhaps at central government now to make sure that those regulations aren't actually stopping good or what could be good practice on the ground. So we need that leadership. We need what's called leadership rather than trailership. I think I've read it in the last couple of hours. I'm just going to try and whiz through a couple of these.
Just clarification about the answers. I'm really sorry, but I thought that a few nights ago at Hustings that the Lib Dems were proposing that they were going to privatise, that they were going to get private companies to do competition for the retrofits.
That's different from, so I'm talking about being contracted out by Cornwall Council, which is different from you paying your energy bill to somebody who's going to come and do the retrofit. So Cornwall Council will be responsible for retrofitting people's homes. That at no point will that cost go via the home of the individual.
Go via the private sector.
Yeah, as I said the other day.
Private sector contracts. Does that clarify that?
And I would also add that sometimes it doesn't work well. Most times when that doesn't work well, it's because there's not being enough money given to that for it to work properly. It has to be properly invested in for it to work.
Question about sort of bigger strategic structural funding. The question is, what funding will support delivering ambitious targets during the UN decade of ecosystem restoration? Is that a real thing, Dan? Is that something that you've wanted to have?
I was tweeting it.
The UN,
the UN decade of ecosystem restoration is a real thing, but I was tweeting the question. I'm not.
Can you say it again? Sorry.
Yes, what structures of funding will support delivering ambitious targets during the UN decade of ecosystem restoration? I'm thinking this might be to do with how we engage internationally with our partners to make sure the right systems are in place.
We've got the ODA budget, the Overseas Development Assistance, and a large amount of that actually now is going on environmental projects. And we've also established a blue belt of protected marine areas around the British overseas territories in many cases, so that we've got marine reserves where we have those islands dotted around the world. And there's been initiatives such as the Darwin Project, which were very successful in terms of helping habitats in some developing countries.
The problem is some of those are a bit offsetting, aren't they?
No, not particularly. No, a lot of them, like the Darwin Project, those are genuine projects to help restore habitats for vulnerable species.
Right, I'm assuming they're all genuine projects, but some of them aren't.
Well, they're not. I mean, if you mean offsetting as in plant a few trees so that we can keep. It's not. That's what people generally mean when they say offsetting.
Right. Yes.
These are just a very broad range of environmental projects backed by British funding.
You see that sort of structural funding continue?
Yes.
Should you?
Yes, we've got a very large, we, as people know, we commit 0.7% of our GDP to overseas development, and quite a lot of that is doing very, very good work internationally for our environment.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to respond to that? Karen?
I just want to say, I always think it's quite sad that countries overseas have to depend on structural funds from other countries. And I know in the Green Party manifesto we want to raise it to 1% of GDP, which is quite a significant amount of money, to help other countries assist them to decarbonise like we are. But it's the unequal relationship between the developing world and ourselves that is the problem. And just handing money all the time is not resolving that situation, and sitting back and think we're great doing it. We've got huge systemic changes to make, and that is one of them. We have to look at international trade and how we are exploiting people all across the globe, buying their cheap stuff, and it's just appalling.
Founders of Extinction Rebellion, in fact, said that having established Extinction Rebellion on the back of needing to tell the truth and act now around the climate emergency, that in actual fact this isn't really about climate change. It's about climate change is a consequence of wholesale dysfunctional systems that we've generated, and I think it's very important to understand the connection between all those, the complex thing. Well, I think we're nearly at the end of our allotted time. How much wiggle room have we got? It's 9, but I'm going to ask everybody a personal question. That came out wrong. I'm going to ask you something. But are there any other burning questions? I think I've more or less covered most things that have come through here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 questions here. Okay. Can you make it punchy?
Yeah, no, it's just punchy. As a vegan of 30 years and increasingly concerned about the effect of animal agriculture on the climate, why should I vote for any of you? What are your parties doing? Should we all be vegetarian?
Right, vegan or vegetarian, we're going to hold that there. The next one was here.
Elephant in the room, global population and family planning. Where do all your parties stand on encouraging other countries and people in this country to take up good practices?
Family planning, population, veganism, thank you, there was one here, and then there was here.
Yeah, this one's St George. It says that you're putting funding into it, but you're not saying where to. As the Conservatives have been in charge of the government for a long time now, I have to assume that it's for one of two reasons. That A, you've looked into it, but you've misjudged it and you've not been able to figure a way to challenge climate change without compromising, which Conservatives seem very doubtful of right at this moment. And
so is it about where the money's being put?
Yeah, or two, you have not been open to other people's ideas, which is what you have just been saying, that this is a group effort here. I think that the majority of the people here will believe that, and then the Conservatives have just been going through their own ideas with without listening to anyone else's, which could be very good for climate change, our fight against climate change.
That's where the money's going and being open to new ideas. So I'm going to ask the first come, first served on those, on veganism, on population and family planning, putting your money where your mouth is and listen to others. So the first come, first served on those three, and then I'm going to come to 3 more last ones. First come, first served on those 3. Florence.
I think both those 2 points, it really comes down to education, and I think that I don't think everyone should have to be vegan, but I think we do have to massively reduce our meat consumption. I think if we all did that, that would make a big difference, and also we can change the way that farming practices take place, sort of behavioural changes in the way farming happens, which I think would help as well. Population, I mentioned in my presentation about it's about educating and increasing opportunities of women so that they have control and choices over their future. It's not about controlling when they can have children, it's about making sure they have the opportunities and they are choosing when they have children. That is a huge part of our policy, and what we need to do is make sure we're not overlooking that for other advantages and ignoring the role of women.
I'm going to hold those for 1 second, because I know George, you have to respond to that query about.
Yes, I don't really agree with that. So I set out, for instance, that we've got a £650 million nature fund, that we spend over £3 billion on agriculture policy. There's a significant fund for overseas development aid, and that's all published in project by project, as are the sort of contracts for difference which fund renewable energy. So I think there's plenty of public information about where money is spent to tackle this challenge. And I said at the very outset that we need a cross-party approach and international concerted action on this. So, and it's been an area, climate change, where actually in Parliament there has been some cross-party consensus about how to address these challenges, not least the Climate Change Act that was passed with the support of all of the parties. So, I mean, I'm sorry if you thought I was going to say, wow, one of the other parties told me something I didn't know about, so I'm now going to vote for them. I'm not going to do that tonight. And I was invited here, I think, to set out what we're doing. But I absolutely believe that all of the parties should...
but it's about collaboration as well, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's what I said in my opening comment.
Can I have three? Thank you. Oh, right. I'm going to go three on that one. I've got glasses on, sorry. So very, very quickly, and we'll try and...
Could I just put it like this? On the subject of animal agriculture, methane is a very, very potent greenhouse gas, more potent, in fact, than CO2. Methane is CH4. So what I would just simply say is, why fixate on CO2? You can fixate more on CH4. If you're worried about... You are what you eat. If you're worried about heat, cut down on the meat.
Thank you very much indeed.
Just following on from what you were saying about collaboration, would it not perhaps be a good idea to take the party politics out of this and set up a commission, a cross-party commission that lasts not for a 5-year parliament, but for the next 30, 50 years to deal with this?
People in the room well know I'm a member of the Labour Party, but I used to be a member of the Green Party, and I remember Caroline, how is it to be an MP, the first Green MP? Have you got used to it yet? And she turned around and said, I'll never get used to the oil industry walking into the lobbies of this Parliament and buying our democracy. I just wondered, George, I'm directing this at you, you might know this. You had this little bung from this global warming policy forum. Did you spend it wisely?
Thank you very much. And finally, over here.
So the Extinction Rebellion protests put the climate crisis at the top of the agenda. Do you think we should be treating the protesters as criminals?
Thank you. Okay, so just to finish, for a really meaty one. Ooh, see what I did there. Leading a cross-party long-term coalition to engage with the emergency.
Should we ban lobbies from the lobby?
Should we ban lobbies from the lobby? Thank you very much indeed. And have Extinction Rebellion. Should we be treating people who break the law for this as criminals? Any offers? Your final, Florence?
That one's no, absolutely not. And yes, in our manifesto we have a policy to create an organisation that is separate to government that will hold companies to account. And I have the exact wording wrote down. I didn't get to it in my presentation, but anyone, if they want to come and check with me afterwards, they can.
Thank you.
We have
Paul, I think.
The Extinction Rebellion people should not be treated as criminals. Actually, increasingly heroes. Have bought our democracy for decades, absolutely decades, and actually kind of in a lot of ways, in the way they operate, actually make the word democracy a bit completely undermined, and that system has got to change. The cross-party aspect, I think, is kind of this is kind of something really telling here. I think George called in for a cross-party approach. The world, this country at least, is as the Conservatives and to an extent the Liberal Democrats have made it. It hasn't arisen out of nowhere. We're sitting here talking about policies, but they are in power. And there is no excuse for them not to already have taken the kind of action that we see necessary. Methane, I'm not a vegetarian or a vegan, but I don't really eat meat very much. And I think that is probably the right way to go. But I think Floss is quite right. Education educates. I think you're right.
Karen?
I just want to say that I think politics has failed the climate issue. We've known all this since 1992 and basically nothing has been done. I think it's with great sadness I think the Labour Party and the Conservatives and the Lib Dems to some extent have been the cause of this problem, and that's why I'm in the Green Party. I would like to mention population. I think that is the elephant in the room, and to know that 250,000, this country alone will grow by 250,000 people every year, so our emissions are going to go up naturally. It's a real issue we do have to face, but I think the one way we can face it is realise that we consume more over here in the West than we do in developing nations. So rather than reduce population, because I'm not going to shoot my next door neighbour, it's if I can choose, it would be to consume less as people. And that's, rather than cutting population, we just have to consume less. Okay, and the chap there that wants to make XR not criminals.
Very quickly, Karen.
Can I just say, having been arrested in October and being made a criminal, you'd be taking away our weapon. And I don't know whether I'm quite happy with that, because that's what civil disobedience is, what we're using to get attention. If you made us benign, then we wouldn't get that attention. So, though I don't feel a criminal, and I will probably face a court case, I don't mind. But that is our weapon, so I would like to keep it at the moment, if you don't mind. And on that remarkable note,
I don't know how many other climate debates end up with arresty conversations, but we do have to leave now because there are people waiting for us. Can I just say thank you very much? There were more questions, and I think there were more responses available, but we are going to remain respectful to those who have hosted us. So can we say thank you to all of us? Short slots, so please do continue the conversations afterwards. This is all about a conversation. Thank you very much indeed for calling.
Thank you, Andrew, as well.